So as you said, and as I shared, there are several tools out there. Do you think that whoever is running the SOC center or whoever makes calls should focus on investing in one integrated platform, or they should have multiple tools, each focusing on certain critical area, or each tool specializes in certain critical area? In other words, do you recommend a best of breed approach, or do you recommend an integrated one platform approach in the context of automating SOC operations?
I always think defense in depth. So here, I'm not going to get into them, but I would easily say we have 4 families of AI, and each family does something different in terms of scope. But if you bring everything into one, let's say you bring everything into a single source, you could effectively be extremely effective because you would likely become a master of it. We talk about the jack of all trade, master of none. I like to be a jack of all trade, master of all as much as possible. If you single scope it, what comes to my mind is like I get a little bit of fear. And that's because it alludes to a potential single source of failure. If that one item goes down, or if attackers learn how to bypass it, or you lose your defense in depth. And to me, I would caution against that. If it was me doing it, I would ask myself, do I really feel comfortable putting all my faith on this one item only?
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast Series with Dr. Dave Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee is the author of the book Cybersecurity Readiness, a holistic and high-performance approach, a Sage publication. He has been studying cybersecurity for over a decade, authored and edited scholarly papers, delivered talks, conducted webinars and workshops, consulted with companies, and served on a cybersecurity SWAT team with Chief Information Security Officers. His work on proactive cybersecurity has been featured on USA Today. Dr. Chatterjee has been a tenured professor at the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia. As a Duke University visiting scholar, Dr. Chatterjee teaches in the cybersecurity programs at the Pratt School of Engineering.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast Series. I'm your host, Dave Chatterjee. Today, we are exploring the Modern Security Operations Center, or SOC, what it looks like when augmented by artificial intelligence, and how that changes the dynamics of cybersecurity operations, talent strategy, and incident response. My guest is Will Ledesma, Director of MDR Cybersecurity Operations at Enable. Will brings over 2 decades of frontline and strategic SOC leadership experience, and today he will lead the discussion about the SOC of the future, one that's already here. Will, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure. I've really been looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you at the conference in San Francisco.
Yes, back at RSA. That was awesome.
Back at RSA, yes. And I loved your story. I want to mention to the listeners that Will has an amazing background, and we want to thank Will for his service to the nation. And I found the discussion so fascinating. I had to invite you to the podcast, and I said, Will, you got to share your story with my listeners. So without any further ado, Will, share with the listeners, provide some professional highlights.
So it's the year 2004. It's just a normal day for me going into work. I am a IT system admin back then at that time. And I drive in and I walk through the door and my boss instantly starts yelling at me. Will, things are broken. Things aren't working. We're losing money. Get on it now. Okay, sir. You could have, called my flip phone, my cell phone back in the days, right? What they were. But all right, so, I get on the systems, and I had a Windows NT and a Windows 2003 server at the time. And turns out that after doing some investigation and really diving in, my systems were hacked. That was shocking to me. All right, back in the time, there wasn't a lot of open source intelligence on trying to figure out who came at you and so forth, but I'm not going to name any countries or anything like that, right? But it definitely, doing some triangulation, calculations, hops, and so forth, I could pinpoint a location, and I found the attackers had an open RDP server. And I thought to myself, these guys hurt me. They hurt my company. They hurt livelihoods. They hurt people. I want to hurt them back. And when I started looking at how I was going to do recon and potentially how to attack back, I stopped myself and I said, wait a minute. I don't think I know enough about this truly to conduct this attack. And so the very next day, I walked into a local university and I said, hey, do you guys have cybersecurity? And they said, no, we have information security. I said, awesome, sign me up. And that was my pivotal moment from IT, because I started off my career in 2001 at Microsoft as a technical support engineer. But that was my pivotal moment in my life from when I switched from IT to cybersecurity. And Dave, thank you for the mention earlier, and I appreciate that as well. In terms of a few years ago, I also, as a crazy old man, decided to join the United States Air Force Reserves. And, when allowed, I get to wear a cyber patch on my shoulder and go and be a cyber defender and mentor out there as well. So, yeah, a little bit about me. So thank you.
Well, that's wonderful. And I know that you have a very distinguished background. You were just being very polite to keep it short and succinct, but I'm sure people can learn more about you when the podcast is released and they follow you. But to set the stage for our discussion, Will, as I mentioned in the introduction, we'll talk about how AI is empowering the SOC personnel. It is not new news that SOC operations can be very intense. There is a major burnout that happens. I've had the pleasure of having podcast guests have been in SOC operations for many years, and they have come and shared their stories. And there's been an ongoing effort to build relevant tools and technologies to take the grunt work away from the personnel so they could do creative, interesting work that would excite them. So that's like a high-level overview of my impression of where SOC is going. But you've been in the trenches. You worked in SOC operations. What are your thoughts?
So, great question, Dave. So for me, there's a lot of fear right now on this wave of AI, right?
Yeah.
Like what's going to happen?
Yeah.
What is the future? For me, the future and the reality of what I've been doing and what we've been seeing successful is augmentation, right? Augmenting the human.
Mm-hmm.
Don't allow AI to be a replacement, but as an enabler, right? And we'll dive into here in a bit. I have some stories for you that I'm hoping you'd be excited to hear on how we're doing that successfully, or how, in my career that I have found success with that. And it's really to accelerate the ability to draw conviction, right? Contextualize data and respond with precision. We're not removing the human from the loop. We're empowering them to do better with the tools and have that faster insight.
And that is consistent with how AI needs to be used. I get the opportunity of doing research in that area, delivering talks, engaging with executives. And I will often say that, yes, you want to automate using AI, but that has to be coupled with very strategic human intervention. You need to know when to bring in the human to test, to validate, to review, to do quality control, as opposed to just letting the tool run its course and not checking on a regular basis. Because technology is great, we need the technology, but technology makes mistakes and we can't afford those mistakes. So we need that right balance. And I think you are speaking to that. I wanted to share with listeners that when we talk about AI tools, there are many out there. So I was doing some research prior to this discussion, and I came across tools such as Dropzone AI, Prophet Security, Torque Hypersoc, Palo Alto Cortex, Microsoft Security Copilot, Vectra AI, and more. And the functionalities range from, identifying alerts, escalating high-risk incidents, providing prioritized alerts, providing contextual evidence, generating summaries, remediation, and more. So the good news is there is a lot of good technology out there that can empower the analysts. In my humble opinion, I think the question is what to use and how best to use them. What are your thoughts?
Well, I go back in time a few years back, right? And how were we first starting to utilize these enrichments, these tools, right?
Yeah.
And in the past, it was essentially to get intel faster to the analyst, right? In terms of, hey, let's take an IP address, for example. And you're going to take that IP address and you want to know if it's potentially malicious. Well, you can run it against open source intelligence or internal intelligence, and you can drive back like, hey, this is what I know, right? I know because somebody reported this as bad, that this is likely bad. But what if, and as successful as that was, what if you found yourself with no returns, with no hits, right? Like, what was the next steps? So it turned into okay, if enrichment can only get us so far, what are the next items, right? And you highlighted some of them, like, okay, now with, agentic AI and LLMs and all these things that we have going on, it allows us to get information out much faster and compiled much faster. But there's something you talked about that I want to just touch on just a moment, right? You're talking about the controlling of the AI. Don't let it just go and do its own thing. And we have to remember there's a lot of fear, right? Whenever I get asked these types of questions, there's a lot of fear of like, well, how do you know that the AI is doing what you want it to do and so forth? Well, that's because we taught it. Every single thing that it does, it's been taught by a human, right? Even when it makes mistakes, we still teach it. Even agentic AI, like it goes and it does something, and you're like, no, that's wrong, right? You pat it on the hand. That was not right. So it's still governed by the human, regardless if it's even a seeming, like it seems like it's doing it all by itself. So with that being said, right, it now having the ability to compile this information versus just the enrichment, and depending on how people want to run their SOCs or their operations, right? Like I think of multiple different models. One is, do you want to provide that information to your customers? Two is, do you want to provide it to your analyst, right? Does it matter if the AI conducts the investigation and then gives it to your human analyst to then go and read and say, okay, yes, this is good, this is bad, or there's something bad here, I need to do more, right? It's all about that conviction. It's all about that time, which used to take us hours to do and now takes seconds. It literally has changed our world almost overnight from what we were doing in the past.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Now, when you were talking about, processing of alerts, when there's a detection of anomalies, there's a detection of a potential cyber attack, and the message goes through. What I have found in my work, that oftentimes organizations are not prepared to take prompt action. They're not prepared structurally, from a governance standpoint, logistically, to quickly process the alert and make a decision as to whether they want to take an action or they choose not to take an action. Obviously, the good practice the best practice would be to record the reports, review the reports, and then record the decision or the action based on the review, because then you have something to go by later on. If there is a case or something, you can bring it to the court of law and share with the judge and the jury as to what you did and why you did. And that's something I recommend organizations do on a regular basis. The extent to which this can be automated, fantastic. But then I think there's still a need for human review, human intervention. I go back to what you just said, and I wanted to ask you a couple of follow-ups. As you are aware, there are tools that's coming out. I recently had the pleasure of talking to a gentleman who has a company called Root, and they market a tool that not only identifies, detects, but also remediates. It's automated. It's an AI tool. What has been your experience of using such tools? How effective are they? And how robust are they? Like if you implement a tool such as the one I talked about or something similar, how proactively can you thwart attacks, or like in terms of a percentage, are you 70% protected, 80% protected, or 50% protected? Do you follow what I'm asking?
I am. That's such a good question. So I don't want to turn this into a company spiel. Right?
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
want to stay
Correct.
as binary as possible here.
Correct.
And so I can say in my lifetime, I have seen tools as root, as you were just describing, right, hold success.
Okay.
And however, it leans on the experts of our experience as well, right? As we mentioned earlier, we're training, we're teaching, we're mentoring the AIs also. And those convictions that the AIs are making, right, in terms of remediation, they're still driven and governed by the human itself. So at some point, I would imagine in the future, we do get an AI that finds it and does it all on its own, right? It literally, like, we've taught it enough that it just comes out and it says, hey, by the way, I was hunting data and this looks like a potential bad thing, with no prior set signals for it to look at, for it to know at, just to say, this is what's bad. That's, to me, the next evolution of from where we're at, such as from the tool that you were just describing, into where we're going to lead to, and what will the next wave be. But for me, it's still, attackers are always going to be human, right? And what do attackers do? Like, let's say I'm going to attack, I don't know, my home network, and I hit a defense. Well, am I going to just give up? No, I'm going to figure out how to get around it, right? I'm going to change my tactics. And therefore, the augmenting and the blending of like the human and the AI mind, that's where I really see us being powerful. Because if we just allow one to be alone, how do we trust, what's really happening there? Do we trust the human? Do we trust the AI? But together, right, you have essentially like one anomaly on one side, and then you have another anomaly on the other side. Well, alone, they don't technically represent anything, right? It's just an anomalous item. But if there's a bridge there that you can put and say, wait a minute, if A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C, then that bridge there is the human and the AI working together that allows us to then be much more powerful in those, like those SOAR actions or remediations, right? The things that you were just describing on the detections. Ultimately, it shows success, right? And it just depends on where you have it scoped, right? We're seeing a lot of attacks against the cloud, right? And that's just because the edge has moved, right? The perimeter has now moved to the edge. And so as long as you're pushing your response capabilities there, you should find success yourself. But if you leave it on your local systems, or if you have a hybrid system and your source of truth is your local system, and you go and you take an action against the local system and it doesn't sync properly, well, the attacker's still in the cloud, right? And so therefore, it just depends on where you want to find your extra success. For me, I would want to put it everywhere, right? Like absolutely, like left a boom, right a boom, everywhere. Like I want to have as much signals and as much actions as possible in order for us to contain the potential threats from threat actors that are looking to hurt, economies, businesses, people.
Yeah, makes sense. Fair enough. So you had mentioned about sharing an incident or two. This might be a good time to talk about them.
Sure. So a few years ago, right, we had a customer that had come under attack. And I'm not going to speak of the attack, just it was an attack. So I go and I speak with my senior analyst and I say, hey, I want to do a postmortem with you. Let's talk about this. And I want to know the indicators of attack and the indicators of compromise that you found. And they said, okay. So we go through and they show me 10 IOCs, IOAs, right? Okay, awesome. How long did it take you to get these? He says, well, Will, it took me about 60 minutes. Well, that's impressive, because one, you're working in a sea of data, right? There's a lot of tools that you have to go and you have to build this story against. And I said, let me try something with you. And we ran a command together, and it was calling one of the AIs that we had built to augment essentially that team. And it returned 13 returns, right? It had 10 that he had, and it had an additional 3. But out of the additional 3, 2 turned out to be real. 1 turned out to be just an anomalous item, right? It wasn't a part of the actual attack chain. But the power here is that it took him 60 minutes to find those 10. It took us together with the augmentation of the AI 10 seconds. And that to me is just, I describe it as like, we all have heard or I would believe we've all heard the saying of a needle in a haystack, right? If I stick my hand into a haystack looking for a needle, eventually I might find it. It might prick me, might draw some blood. But if you're an incident responder or an incident handler and a customer is telling you, hey, I'm under attack, and you have no really real pivotal footholds as to them just telling you I'm under attack, what do you want to go look for? Well, for me, I'd want to, some of the things you think of are like, well, let me go look at the perimeter. Let me see if there's any type of IP addresses or whatever. But that might take too long, right? Because there's a lot of telemetry and there's a lot of data there. So I'd be interested in potential processes. What are running on the endpoints? You told me that you're under attack. What's the computer that's running that you think is under attack? What are the processes that have ran? What is anomalous? What is not normal of behavior to that actual endpoint or that actual user? And so I'll give another example to kind of highlight what this is, right? So when we think of processes, think of as like if you're going to open up Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, you open up Word, each one of these applications executes a process, right? And there's hundreds to thousands of processes running on a single computer at any moment. So I took an analyst that we were training. I said, look, I'm going to teach you one of these AIs on how it can augment you. And so we ran a 48-hour time window in one environment, and we returned 4 million processes. So, okay, if I'm looking at a needle stack, which of these 4 million can actually hurt me if I stick my hand into it? Which one's going to draw blood? So we ran the AI. From those 4 million, it brought it down to 4, and this time in 3 seconds. And so now I know the 4 needles that can potentially hurt me, and I know exactly what to go look at, right? Because these are the abnormal behavior, like abnormal items to the environment, to the endpoint, to the end user, right? But it's all being calculated and run through the neural networks that we have set up. And it allows us to find this success, which I know that others are also finding this same success, right? It just can't just be us. But this to me is the next level of the augmentation, right? To empower the human as well, to not just leave them to figure out the way that we used to in the past, right? When I brought up my story back in 2004, I didn't tell you all how long it took me to figure that out, right? It took me quite some time to figure out the IOCs, the IOAs, but now it's seconds. It's a total different world now.
Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt that you need technology. You're not going to be able to monitor effectively the hundreds of thousands of potential attack attempts and thwart them without the aid of technology. So that's a no-brainer. I guess the question is which technology or set of technologies to use and how to use them well. So backing up a little bit, we're talking about making the security operations centers as effective as possible. And once again, drawing on your experience, what are some of the characteristics or attributes of an excellent security operations center? And you can maybe share a couple of metrics that one could use to gauge how well the center is doing.
So for me, the KPIs that I'm always looking at is how effective is the AI being and how effective is the human being.
Okay.
So I want to know what is the rate of detections that our AI is handling, right? And one of the metrics that I have is 70% right now. So 70% of our detections are handled by AI. And to some that might feel kind of shocking, like, whoa, 70%. But at the same time, the 30%, why is the human, or like, why are we not doing 80%? Why are we not doing 90%, right? Like, why 70? And that's because the other detections, require that extra level mindset, right? The combination of the human and the AI together, not just the AI doing it and saying, okay, because we've trained it, right? Again, it's doing 70% at what we have taught it. And therefore that to me is important. Also the time to triage, right? Time to investigate, time to escalate, all those, the MTT numbers that we're always interested in. We have found success in that we can. There's a game that I play, and I wish I had it here for you, Dr. Chatterjee. I don't have it though, but it's essentially like two images, and one is written by AI and one is written by human, and you try to pick out which one's which. And I have found that normally when I pose this question, people can't really tell the difference. That is a successful SOC, right? That is a successful operation where you have trained your AI and you have governed it enough to where it feels and it looks human, because that's exactly what we want to do, right? We want to still hold that human aspect. But again, it's all been governed by us. So to find success, the metrics, as I just mentioned, would be the time to triage. How much is your AI handling? What is your return rate, right? Your AI is going to be sending things out. Get that telemetry back from your customers. Find out if it's doing a good job or not. Put your team on top of it as well, right? Don't just let the AI do it. Do some QA against it also, and make sure that it's staying within the parameters that you've set. And that should allow you to find success into incorporate AI into your operations, right? Whether you're just an IT ops, whether you're a SOC, whether you're a NOC, or whatever operation you're running, you should be able to find success by incorporating these KPI metrics to measure success.
Excellent. Couldn't agree with you more. In fact, talking about KPIs, I'm a huge believer that it's not about having too many of them. You want to focus on a few of them and make sure they are worth measuring. I often say that measure what needs to be measured and not what's convenient to measure. Sometimes I've seen in organizations that capture a lot of metrics, measures, but that's not very useful. They don't do anything with it. So why bother measuring if you're not going to act on them? So therefore, identifying, developing KPIs should be a very rigorous and meticulous process and should be goal-driven. You have to have goals driving each metric. Like Will said, he talked about a couple of them. That might be just sufficient, or you can suitably modify it depending on what you are looking for. So as you said, and as I shared, there are several tools out there. Do you think that whoever is running the SOC center or whoever makes calls should focus on investing in one integrated platform, or they should have multiple tools, each focusing on certain critical area, or each tool specializes in certain critical area? In other words, do you recommend a best of breed approach, or do you recommend an integrated one platform approach in the context of automating SOC operations?
I always think defense in depth, right? And so here, I'm not going to get into them, but I would easily say we have 4 families of AIs.
Okay.
And each family does something different in terms of scope. But if you bring everything into one, right? Like let's say you bring everything into a single source, you could effectively be extremely effective because you would likely become a master of it, right? And we talk about the, jack of all trade, master of none.
Right.
I like to be a jack of all trade, master of all as much as possible.
Right.
But if you single scope it, what comes to my mind is like I get a little bit of fear, and that's because it alludes to a potential single source of failure, right? If that one item goes down, or if attackers learn how to bypass it, or you lose your defense in depth. And to me, I would caution against that. If it was me doing it, I would ask myself, do I really feel comfortable putting all my faith on this one item only?
So essentially what you're saying is the tools out there, they do different things, not necessarily those overlap. So it might be in the best interest of the company to invest in multiple.
If you can afford it, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Some companies you just can't. And
Yeah.
so then we go back into your best of breed that you just mentioned, right? And then you want to go and do reviews, do your homework.
And the fact that you just mentioned that some companies can't, that begs the question, are the SOC operations outsourced quite often? Do you see that a lot?
In my lifetime, I have. It's very hard for a company to justify the cost of what it takes to have a SOC, right? Like,
Yeah.
some can, but you're gonna pay a pretty penny on that. And so you find yourself potentially going to outsourced operations. And it's not a bad thing, right? It's not that it's a bad thing. You just you find the one that you feel works best for you, test them, validate them, make sure that what the industry sees and what your coworkers see, right? In cybersecurity, it's been a small world for a very long time, right? And I'll give a story in the Air Force, right? So in the Air Force, we were talking about doing this mission and doing this cohort mission with another squadron out of another base. And one of the sergeants, he said, I know that team over there, they're not worth it. They're not worth our time. Like, they're just not worth it. We're not going to go. We don't want to spend time with them. And that kind of goes in cybersecurity also, right? Our world has been so small for so long that you kind of learn who knows and who doesn't know, right? And that follows, that reputation will follow you the same way that the Air Force reputation. Granted, the sergeant was a little, kind of extreme there. It's all one team, one fight. But still, you can go do reviews, and if one maybe has like a proof of concept or a proof of value, test them out.
Yeah.
See if they can do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, outsourcing is never a bad idea as long as you do it well. And that's where, again, I say that when you outsource doesn't mean you are moving away from it. You have to provide oversight. You have to manage it. And you have to have a good relationship with the service provider. Make sure they're doing what they promised you. And like you said, before you even make the commitment, get the referrals, go and check it out, talk to their customers, see how well they perform. So you have to do your due diligence. You cannot just take an approach, SOC is being handled by company X, so one less thing on my table. Even if you outsource it, it's still part of your cybersecurity defense. And so you can't ignore it, or you can't. And at the end of the day, if there is a breach, you will still be blamed. The company will still be held responsible. You can't say, it's the fault of the vendor and we outsourced it. It doesn't go that way.
It reminds me of risk, right? Because you're putting your faith in them also. And have they done their risk tolerance? Have you asked them, what is your business impact, right? What if you get hacked, what happens to me, right? Those are the questions you should also be asking those potential vendors to ensure that, as you mentioned, that you're doing your due diligence for your company as well.
Absolutely. You have to do the due diligence. You have to be very deliberate. You have to assess their risk profile, their risk posture, and see how well it aligns with yours. So absolutely, a lot of thought has to go into it. It's not something that you just execute overnight. You have to think through it. Well, unfortunately, we are coming towards the end of our discussion today. We do have a few more minutes. I'd like to pick your brains on the SOC talent strategy. Yes, we are advocating use of technology, empowering the users, but we are not suggesting that SOC be free of humans. So how do we select the right people for SOC operations? And what can we do to attract them and retain them?
Great question. So let's target the first part, right? What are we looking for? So what we're really looking for now it's always been a thing, but even more so now, is just really the critical thinkers, right? The ones that can interpret patterns, questions, outcomes, that don't just follow a SOP and don't ask any questions, right? You have to ask the who, what, when, why, where. It's not just a simple process anymore. We've never been able to cookie cutter cybersecurity as much as I've been told that it's like, no, you can do this and that. You really can't, because every investigation is dynamic, right? It can lead into different paths. And so having somebody that can think as a potential, maybe even a leader in the future as well, those are what we're looking for. And how can we attract that talent, right? So I really like this question because it dawned on me that if I was an analyst again, and I'm putting my shoes back on and I'm saying, hey, I want to go and work at an analyst level again, what am I going to be looking for? Okay, well, I'm going to look at what the industry is doing right now. I'm going to go and review and read what job postings are all looking about and talking about. But one of the key things that I'm really going to be targeting is that SOC utilizing AI? Because I know that it's coming. Everybody's talking about it. So do I want to risk my career in joining an operation that might not be utilizing AI? I might be hurting my future because now I'm not going to get that experience, right? So to attract them, you also have to utilize AI as well. Hey, we're doing this and this and this, and this is how it will benefit you. This is how you will learn. This is our plans to teach you on how to up your experience as well. And to me, that's a big one in one, helping with attrition, right? Because you're teaching your team, you're teaching your team members, and two, how to actually attract that talent into your operations as well.
Excellent. So as we wrap up, I wanted to leave listeners with a framework that I have been using extensively over the last couple of years to guide cybersecurity governance. It's called the Commitment, Preparedness, Discipline Framework, CPD framework. It's been empirically validated. There are 17 factors which are associated with that framework, and how the companies perform relevant to those factors does give a gauge on their level of robustness, security robustness. But in the context of this discussion, when we talk about those three key dimensions, commitment, preparedness, and discipline, this is how the framework applies. When it comes to commitment, we are talking about adopting those tools. These tools require leadership commitment to integrating AI thoughtfully into SOC workflows. And Will was exactly talking about that. That it's not just about getting a technology, but how you institutionalize them. How do you embed them in your work processes? Preparedness, it's about making sure that the SOCs have the right data pipeline, have the appropriate validation processes, and the right kind of training for analysts to leverage AI outputs effectively. Once again, I want to echo what Will said, that if you want to attract the best talent, you want to make sure that they know the environment they're coming in, the technologies that they will be able to use and be trained in are the very best, because that enhances their marketability. And it is a catch-22 situation, because you do run the risk. Once they get trained, they might leave. But I'm of the opinion and philosophy that try to attract the best, provide them with the best training, and if they leave, it's okay. You get the next crop. But as long as they're there, you will get the best possible value or the best bang for the buck. Now, the final dimension of the CPD framework, which is discipline. In the context of SOC operations, we are talking about guardrails that are needed to ensure that the AI acts within safe boundaries, with humans retaining oversight for judgment and escalation decisions. And that's been at the center of our discussion today. It's never just AI, it's the interplay of human and AI, how one reinforces the other. And in fact, they're learning from each other to make each other even better and more powerful. So that's the connection, that's the dynamic that organizations have to recognize. But the final word is always my guests. So Will, I'll let you wrap it up for us with any final thoughts, final takeaways, final words of advice.
I really like that CPD framework that you just described there, and I'm going to go do some extra research on that. I really like that. I have a buddy who works at NASA, and he does cybersecurity AI for them also. And we're both in the mindset that the next generation of workforce will have, that does anything with a computer, will and must have a level of adaptation and adoption with AI, right? So embrace it, adapt it, and for leaders, right, don't just implement it, align it with your people strategy, align it to retain, not just replace your best talent, And there's a last story that I'm going to give that will emphasize what you were talking about, Dr. Chatterjee, is that I remember having a conversation with a CFO once, and I said, hey, I want a budget for my team. Right? And he said, no, you're gonna get them all these certifications, they're gonna train them up, and all they're gonna do is they're just gonna leave, right? And within the next 3 to 5 years. I said, okay, cool. Like if they leave, they leave. But what if they never leave and we do not invest in them? We're just hurting ourselves. So just as you mentioned, do not be afraid to invest in your people. They will stay with you because they value that, right? People value that you invest in them as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Chatterjee, and to the listeners here. Thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate you inviting me and allowing me to be a part of here with you.
Well, it's been truly a pleasure. I'm glad we could have this conversation, and now listeners get to hear what you have to share. So I hope we can do another sequel at some point in time. But till then, thank you again.
Thank you.
The information contained in this podcast is for general guidance only. The discussants assume no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this podcast. The information contained in this podcast is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantee of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness. The opinions and recommendations expressed in this podcast are those of the discussants and not of any organization.